Okay, remember that they are changing my voice. This is a very important video. I'm going to talk about the very first playlist I ever made. And back in 2009, it stretched all the way into 2012. And they're probably going to do things to make it harder for me to speak, but bear with me. This information is important. So I was born in the early 80s, and early on I was talking about how the church needs to have a valid moral order. And people who have been watching me for a long time, they understood that. By the time I was 16, I made a song where I said women need to stop being shallow. They need to answer a higher call. They need to obey God. And that I'm never going to conform, and that there's a massive network of oppressors holding people down. That was when I was 16 years old, around 1997 or so. So when I was about to turn 28, okay, in 2009, I made this playlist. I had another playlist about Egypt where I did a very good job. It was chronological, it was logical, it was effective. Okay. And it's clear that they tend to interrupt me more when it's something that they don't want said. Because when I made this playlist, it was a fact-based presentation about the Illuminati and the things that connect to the Illuminati and white supremacy. Okay, they interrupted me to the extreme. So it's obvious for many reasons. Also, at one point, I proved definitively to anyone with sense that they're covertly drugging me in 2012 before, if I'm not mistaken, it was before or shortly after the playlist was eventually finished. Okay. So as they were covertly drugging me at the time, I had some kind of interesting ideas that I'd explore. And the video is somewhat out of order, as my videos are often uploaded now that I'm extremely fumed and poisoned daily. So sometimes I don't finish a playlist before I start another one. Okay, and that's because of that. So let me just point out 6 points here, and then we'll start going over some titles real quick. This won't be this super long series. It'll probably be just 2 parts. It won't be that long. So I was carrying my cross, obviously. And the Bible says the Lord weighs the motives, not the image, right? The motives. If you have the proper motives and they blind people to the image of God in you, hey, that's not so important. What's important, you have the proper motives, that you have the proper motives. Okay, so point number 1. I was covertly drugged and fumed the whole time, basically. Point number 2, they made it harder for me to buy the clothes that suited me. Remember, I'm 6'4", I have a certain preference in clothes and color of clothes at the time, and they made it hard for me to match. And they were doing funny things with the hardware and the software on the webcam as well. So basically none of these videos on the first playlist, there was about 200 of them, none of them look that sharp, and none of them I look that handsome. Okay. Except for at the same time in 2012, I had the best martial art picture ever taken. So during this playlist, you see me looking bad in a lot of the early videos. I'd gone back to martial arts, and I was recovering from various things, and alcohol and stress, and them trying to put me on psych meds and stuff because they didn't like my point of view, which is part of a long-standing disagreement between the black community and the white establishment. Okay, and a lot of people kind of co-signed with the black community that psychiatry is a fraud. There was Ionia State Hospital. There's drapetomania, where they used to label blacks mentally ill for running away from the plantation. There's a long history, and it continues to this day, of the political and racial abuse of psychiatry. Okay, and they talk about big pharma, right? Pharmaceuticals and psych meds as death pills, and they do neurological damage, and they disproportionately drug people of color, so they can try to pretend that they're inferior, so they can pretend that they're angry red savages and things of this nature. Okay. The types of propaganda that they would propound. And obviously, I do not agree with what they're doing. So point number 3, I was recovering from alcoholism, and I smoked a lot due to romantic shunning. So I used to basically drink, 12, 15 beers a day, but only for like maybe 4 or 5 years in my 20s. And I quit, drinking on May 6th, okay, 2009, and I started this playlist in August 31st, 2009. Okay. Point number 4, I was going to college after 2010, right? So toward the beginning of the playlist. And I had been to the psych ward in February 26, 2010, and again July 28, 2012, which is around the time I finished the playlist. And they had clearly set me up. I showed proof that they were covertly drugging me. Okay, people knew that they had set me up, and it's crystal clear. Crystal clear. There's no doubt in anyone's mind who's working on this case or anyone who knows me that they set me up. So I've proven definitively with online tests and other things and opinions of mental health people working mental health, that I am not mentally ill. Okay, so just to clarify that, so write that down. I've proven definitively that I'm not mentally ill in many ways. Online tests, opinions of mental health professionals, the facts, the 23 witnesses, what have you. Point number 5, I was shunned by females, so I was stressed and not trying hard to look good, right? I was kind of depressed, kind of sad, recovering from, drinking all the time, smoking weed a little bit, right? Very kind of feeling very down on my luck, right? Very, very shunned and marginalized and outcasted. Point number 6, I made the video playlist to show that I am affected by society while right. And I'm the only one doing the right thing on the entire planet. So you can imagine, I'm not trying to break the rules on TikTok, but I was mad at the world to some degree because they were not helping me out. And some of these videos are about them not helping me out and me telling them that I need them to rally to me so I can, so we can, as a society, create a moral order. Okay. And after my flesh dies, it cannot be done no matter what now, because they did not. So this playlist, first and foremost, kind of shows that I'm doing God's work, that I'm supposed to be in charge, and that they're sabotaging me, and everyone else is either just, a thug with no higher cause, rocker with no higher cause, jock with no higher cause, some corporate guy just concerned with money and social status, some controlled opposition person, some religious person who's just allowed by the state. It says in Matthew 5:10 that you have to be persecuted to be in the kingdom of God, right? Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And they were not doing that. So it definitively shows that I'm persecuted for righteousness' sake. Clearly, you can tell by the subject matter. You can tell by how I look. You can tell by the fact that I've been now making videos for 15 years, and I'm still making videos by myself after reaching out to people time and time again while they're doing all kinds of crazy things. They're part of the church. No offense to anybody, but they're part of various groups that people know are not doing the right thing. And I'm not going to kind of mention those because I'm making this video also for TikTok, and I don't want to break the rules there. So Illuminati Part 1, I talk about how there needs to be a moral order with a wise king. I talk about how the ancient Egyptians were black and that there's people lying about their race. Okay. I continue talking about the timeline in Illuminati 2. I talk about the Rothschilds. A lot of people are talking about Rothschild and Weishaupt and so on and so forth. Okay. In Illuminati Part 4, I say that Jesus is not God, and the white image of Jesus is Mithra and Serapis, etc. Okay. Illuminati Part 6, Part 5 is missing. Part 6, I talk about the Battle of Waterloo, what have you. Part 7, I talk about DNA tests in Egypt. Part 8 and Part 9 as well, and also talk about how psychiatry is being used on blacks. And I talk about Bob Marley and Booker T. Washington, etc. And I bring up that in Numbers 12. Aaron and Miriam, okay, are mad at Moses for having a Cushite, aka what is often described as an Ethiopian wife. And I bring up that just like many people are mad at me because I'm right about Egypt being black and mixed black, while their people were breaking into two major camps where one of them was saying they were all black and the other one was saying that they were white, I insisted on the precise truth. Okay, and a lot of people were mad at me, mostly white people at the time, white racist people. Okay, I bring up Amos 9:7. It says, "Are you not the same to me as the Cushites, O children of Israel?" Okay, and I make my argument in a very sound way, and the opposition view basically flees from the debate. By that point, they're not really to be found in the comments, and I make a lot more videos about Egypt after that as well, further on down the line. I talk about the Willie Lynch letters in Illuminati Part 10. Okay. In Part 11, I talk about what's called the Trail of King Tut, right? Why it's not as simple as their haplogroup and genetic explanations, and how Sudan and Niger and Nigeria and Chad and the Central African Republic factor in more than they might think. Illuminati Part 13, I'm talking about Gaddafi, and at that point I was angry at him because he was executing Nigerians secretly, because he caused a lot of good people to suffer, because he armed his soldiers with live ammunition to fire on the protesters, and I was objecting to his tactics, but I didn't know that much about him. He also said something to do with the Black September movement, okay, which I don't entirely agree with, and the Lockerbie bomber. So that's how I was feeling at the time, okay. So Illuminati part 14 to part 24 are about kind of similar topics, right? Nigeria, Libya, what have you, okay, and some parts are missing. And part of that is because my first channel ever, came down at some point way back in the day. So part 25, I translated Gaddafi's speech. Part 26, I say justice for Saif al-Islam. I want him to have a fair trial. That's continued into a few more videos later, all the way to like part 30, which is missing. I talk about stuff like that. Part 31, I start saying, that Gaddafi was supporting some of the black civil rights movement, and I thank him for it. Part 32, I explain my stance on Gaddafi, okay, and Mandela. Part 33, if I'm not mistaken, right, about Mandela, it's part of the title. Part 33, I talk about Gaddafi some more, okay, and I eventually try to touch on the Federal Reserve, but I'm very drugged in that video, so I don't do a very good job. And you often see that in these videos these days too. So part 30, going to part 34 is just some more Illuminati stuff. Part 35, I talk about the Nubian tools in the Arab desert a long, long time ago, showing a kind of, that not just in the Bible, but we see before the Bible's timeline, we see that there's Nubian tools in the Arab desert. So this whole Middle East is very much influenced by black Africans, and they fight the best and so on and so forth. I'm saying things like that. I use the example of Bill Gates with some kind of stick is not going to take on people more violent than the best Zulu warriors and stuff like this. No offense to anybody, but this is just me telling the story what I was saying at the time. I talk about how they're instigating World War III with Iran in Illuminati part 36 and part 37, and this gets like the CIA and the military and really against me. The Defense Department, they seem to be cracking down on me because of that, and I was giving my honest opinion. Okay. By the time we get to part 39, I talk about how the devil uses females who are unsuspecting as a tool for the New World Order, and I put in a way that's pretty disrespectful, but whether it's fair or not, I'll put in another video that I'm not going to post on TikTok. Illuminati part 4, I talk about eugenics on Asia, and since then, I've came across the wordplay euthanasia, right? Euthanize, euthanasia, youth in Asia. It's a play on words. How many of you think that's a coincidence when the population in Asia is so large? There's globalists who want to control them sexually, just like everyone else, and I also show that I'm not racist and I'm covering topics from all over the world and so on and so forth. Illuminati part 41 is a very significant part, and I went way over time, so I'm just going to end this part 1 here. Okay, Illuminati part 41, I try to get people to rally. I tell them if they don't, they're going to have a consciousness weighs more heavy than all the planets in the galaxy. I say something to that effect, and I say, hey, we need to work together. We need to solve this together. It's not enough just to say, hey, there's an Illuminati, because people are going to compare that to Bigfoot or something. There's a governing class that are doing things that are wrong, and they're doing horrible things no matter how you slice it, okay? And there is a great conspiracy, no matter how you slice it, when you consider the concerted efforts, transnational corporations, corporate partnerships, political parties, the military-industrial complex. No matter how you slice it, that's the case. And what you think of when you think of the Illuminati is like a straw man. It's like an image game. It's a psyop to confuse you, but there actually are groups like that, and somewhere, somehow, there's a group that's more powerful than the others, and it's pretty straightforward that I'm right and that these videos need to be made, okay? So I'm just going to end this part 1 by saying, again, let's go over, write these things down, right? I was covertly drugged and fumed the whole time. They made it harder for me to buy the clothes that suited me, and they tampered with my hardware and software, and they hacked me to make the video look worse. I was recovering from alcoholism, and I smoked a lot due to romantic shunning. I was going to college, and I had been to the psych ward, after being covertly drugged and fumed, and I was shunned by females, so I was stressed and not trying to look good all the time. Okay, and I had to show people what I was going through and not just the facts, because what I was going through eventually would prove to be even more important than the topic that I was discussing, because eventually I would prove definitively that I'm the idea that Christ in the Bible is superimposed on. okay? And I've been making this argument for maybe 4 years now or so, and there hasn't been a single viable counter argument. So the logic lines up. That is sound. Thank you.